headphones on here so I can monitor. There we go. Hey. 1 2 1 2. Hey. How's it going tonight, guys? Um, just want to talk about, a couple things going on in the world today. Fucking going on in the world for a while, right? Um, man, it's it's a crazy one out there, right? Really, really wild. Really, really wild what's going on. Um, we don't know what's going to go on with really anything at this point coming into the next couple of years. And politics is stirring everything up even more than it has been for a while, which of course we expected. I think some people were hoping for this when they voted for Trump. That was kind of their thing, is they wanted to upset the government and the way it's been run, shake things up, change it up, and hopefully get better results. Um, and I don't think anybody would disagree that a lot of the people, all of us, wanted for a long time to see a better government, to shake things up, to change the nature of it, to get rid of what a lot of us would probably agree was there was corruption, there's questionable ethics, morals, guidances, and we want a government that represents us more, right? Individually, we want to see things that make changes that we think should be. With that, I think too many people have misunderstood and neglected the way government is supposed to work. Okay. There's so many misunderstandings out there about government, what government does what. There's like everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people, it seems like, are putting um, a lot of their weight on the federal government and insinuating that the federal government kind of controls everything, from gas prices or oil prices to the price of eggs at the store, to your bills that you get in the mail. And while the federal government does have things it can do that influence them, has in those impacts, um, the federal government really does not control those things. Many of those things are done right at the level of whatever business is running those things. We are a free capitalist, for better or for worse, country right now. All right. There's very few limitations or government mandates on what businesses can and cannot charge, how they can and cannot operate or conduct their business. And pretending for a moment that electing any president is just going to influence the price of gas or the price of your eggs, because they're going to walk into your local like Walmart, kick the door down and be like, no, you need to mark these eggs down now before I do something like, I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what you think a president is going to do to somebody who's a CEO of a big business to affect the price of eggs. They're not going to be able to change much. The really way that a federal government would do this would be to create better trade deals that lowered the cost of doing business for these people. And what has to happen is, because businesses, especially when they're publicly traded, which is the vast majority of large businesses out there, publicly traded means that they have stocks on the public stock market that anybody can buy and get interest in their business. If they're on the market, man, they have to have a continuous net profit gain every single quarter. Every 3 months, they have to post quarterly profits that are better than their last ones. Otherwise, people will look at it in speculation, say that maybe they're not doing what they can do, or the market maybe isn't where it should be, and there will be a loss. Bear with me, my internet may not be top tier tonight, okay? But I'm working on it. But if it's a publicly traded business, their margins are always their primary thought process. Because if your business doesn't do well, people sell your stock, and your business, regardless if it's actually profitable, massively profitable at times, depending on the size of the business, your business can go under because everybody gets spooked. One person gets spooked, enough people get spooked, it triggers a sell-off, and suddenly your business, which was good, is thrown out the window. And that's insane. We can't have that. We can't have the ability for a profitable business to just be destroyed because of that. But that's where we're at. That's how our stock market kind of holds big sway over all these big businesses. So the only thing a president can do is to create cheaper avenues for these guys to do business or create more markets for them to sell to globally, right? Because they already probably have businesses that they can sell to here. They're already probably selling to as many avenues globally as they can. So they need to be able to sell to more countries, more businesses within those countries, more cities, more ports around the world. Or they need to be able to import whatever raw resources that they use or whatever products that they might import to help create their product. They need to be able to get that. And they need to be able to make their profit or make their product cheaper so that they can widen their margins so that they would be incentivized to lower that price a bit so that there's some room within there so that their net profit can still go up while the price that they charge at the store goes down. Now, will they do that? Probably not. Let's be realistic. If a company's been charging you, $10 for a widget A for the longest time, and they're given a better revenue stream, the ability to create greater profit, and one of their options is that they can charge you a little bit less for that, or they can make all of that revenue and keep it themselves as greater profit. What do you think they're going to do? They've already been charging you that much. The only way they would ever reduce costs is if they were already losing that revenue. If people were already going to stop buying that product and they knew that people were going to stop buying that product, that's the only way that they would have any incentive to lower the price to get back that share of the market. And unfortunately, we have just far too many monopolies today for businesses to worry about that. It's a big issue with where we have gone with our country, the way businesses have been poorly regulated. The SEC and the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, they haven't done as good a job as they should have done to prevent monopolies. There's many simple monopolies out there. So it's really, really stupid that we pretend for even a moment that we are preventing anything like this. Let's see. It's just, I don't know. It's ignorant. It really is. To think that the president is just going to wave a magic wand and lower the cost of things. It's just not real. It's not going to happen. It's not the situation. And it's not really what's impacting you at your level either. There's so many governments within government that people really kind of overlook on a lot of things. You have your city government, of course, which runs your city streets or your village, or you have township governments, which help orchestrate your townships. For those who may not be from here, you have a city, right? And then you have around the city, you have all these like maybe country rural areas. Even within the city, you have different sections of the city, neighborhoods. And many of those are divided up into what are called townships. And each one of those would have usually a town hall building. And within those, that area, that has its own little local government that has its own budgeting and its own planning. And they deal with the county government. So you have city, township, county, and then you have state governments on top of that. And the amount of these that have impacts that people don't even understand. What happens a lot of times at the federal level is they'll come up with these plans and these budgets, and they'll pass bills and legislation. A lot of these budgets, these funds that are set aside and allocated to things, people have to apply for them. So like there was a recent infrastructure bill during the last administration, during the Biden administration. There was tons and tons of money, trillions of dollars. I don't know right off the top of my head exactly how much it was, but it was trillions of dollars thrown out to the states. But they had to, and it doesn't mean that money is definitely spent necessarily. It's just in the budget, right? People still have to apply for it. They still have to be justified for it. So just because you want to fix roadway A or paves, whatever section of a property to create a roadway or whatever the case, doesn't mean it's going to be approved by the state, and it doesn't mean that that's is going to get approved by whatever federal, right? It still has to meet certain standards. So the federal government creates this package for infrastructure, says each state is going to get so much money. Anybody applying for it at the state level, though, has to meet certain guidelines for it to even be a consideration. And then the state will go out and they'll survey the area. They'll look at how much it will cost. They'll decide how much traffic is going through it, how impactful it is to the community or the state at large. And then they'll prioritize which ones actually are going to get help and in what order. If there's a need to do some things before other things, they may decide that some things are only going to be able to be done during a specific time of the year because of the impact to traffic and tourism. There's a lot that goes into that. But the federal government created that bill. It went down to each of the individual states. The states had that money. They said, hey, we got so much money from the infrastructure bill, has all these different plans for bridges or roadways or county roadways or rural roadways, city streets, whatever the case may be. You need to let us know if you'd like to apply for these. And then the county government, your county administrators or your county chairs or whoever the case may be, depending on how your local government is set up and run, because they're not all the same. They just aren't. They have to apply for those grants. So your committees that exist within your boards have to approve things. They have to look at things. They have to coordinate with people. And then these packages need to be put together and they need to be submitted to the state to even go up there. So meanwhile, some people are going, well, that infrastructure bill didn't do anything for me because it didn't do anything for my roads here. Well, that's not because the federal government did anything wrong. The federal government created every opportunity for that to be done. What really failed may have been your state. It may have been your county. It may have been your city. It may have been just members on a committee not doing the proper paperwork or not wanting to move forward on things. It may have been the board not being all on top of things. There's partisan politics that happens on boards where things could absolutely happen, and they decide that they're going to not pursue it because it's being pushed by I'm just trying to adjust some things. I don't want to pick up the background noise too much. Um, but yeah, there's partisan people on committees and boards and stuff throughout all these different levels of government who will not pursue certain things because the package was introduced by a Republican or a Democrat, and they just don't want to utilize those funds because of partisanship. And it's honestly, it's insane that oftentimes people are being punished because of really ridiculous partisanship at local levels that have nothing to do with anything. At local levels of government, there should be zero partisanship because you're not dealing with a federal government at that point. You're not dealing with a state government even most of the time at that point. What you're really dealing with at a local level are your friends and neighbors and the things that are just necessary for how your city or your county is able to take care of the welfare of its people, taking care of those roadways, taking care of those social programs, taking care of making sure everybody's like your city is just clean. There's so much into it. If you haven't visited your counties or your cities board page, pretty much all of them have a page that you can go to and see like the minutes, all the different committees, all the people who are on those committees. It should have contact information like an email, phone number, that sort of thing, to look up your local members' information so you can contact them if you want to. The ones who are directly over you. Townships, I don't know that every township has that kind of information out there. I would like them to. I think that they should. But whether or not they do that is kind of on them. And I understand it's a smaller level and not everybody at that level is going to have the technical understanding, and they're not going to necessarily want to spend them what they perceive as a larger budget for that, even though it could technically be done very inexpensively if somebody knew how to do it. But then who administrates it and how does it carry on from one council to the next, depending on if members change? You know, it's it's complicated when you get to that point. Um, but yeah, just the amount of weight people give the federal government when it's not always federal government things that are impacting a lot of the things that they're talking about. Um, it's wild. It really is. It's people shouldn't be worried about um, the president when it comes to many things that are affecting their everyday life as far as uh, their ability to just say something and just make it so. We don't have kings, and most of the stuff is far more complicated. It really is. Um, if we think tariffs are gonna just auto solve things, let let me ask you this: we've had obviously many presidents in our lifetime. I'm 44 years old. There's been quite a few of them just in my lifetime. Um, there's been so many people who have consulted with these presidents, been on their cabinets, been on their boards, been on committees. And if you think these senators and congressmen and these representatives and these lobbyists and all of these people, you don't think that there's a lot of intelligent people that are out there or that they have access to it. Just an absolute insane amount of information and access to some of the smartest people dealing with this. And you think that none of these people looked at tariffs before and went over every analysis potential for this? We're talking mathematicians that are, beyond Goodwill Hunting in many circumstances. These guys are absolute geniuses, and we are we're here thinking like, oh well, nobody's done it because just nobody wanted to. No. It's been looked at. It's been looked at and analyzed and thought about and talked about. So many presidents just on their run-ups have talked and thrown about and bandied the idea of tariffs and having these trade wars for so long. And the reason we haven't done it in those ways, and in the ways that they're being conducted right now, is because they're a bad idea. Not just because it can damage stock speculation, which was what we're seeing right now with the stocks going up and down constantly, being very reactionary, because that's what stocks are. And when people are dealing with, tens of thousands to millions of dollars on the stock market and things become uncertain day to day, you tend to see a lot of fluctuations because they're looking to go from stocks that may be a little bit more risky to maybe something a little bit more security, a little bit more firmness, and then they'll look back and wait and see how things are going. And if things kind of relax for a day or so, they might go back into those stocks to make sure they keep them afloat, because honestly, those stocks are the ones that are going to pay them the most if they pan out, but they're going to be very reactionary. So that's why you see those trends. But yeah, I mean, that's not the only reason. Trade wars are a terrible idea because when you do things like that, America, a lot of people don't seem to understand that America, by and large, is a consumer country. We are consumer driven for our economy. We consume things. We do. We don't have as many raw resources as other nations do. We can produce a lot of crops. We can produce, meat stock, things of that nature. Wood to a degree, because obviously there's a limited supply of wood and it takes a long time to regrow those trees. And every time you sell off a number of acres and are trying to regrow trees, one, you have to wait a long period of time for those trees to even become large enough to harvest. Foresters might tell you it's not as long because they're just like geologists, they're thinking in longer terms as smaller time. But for most people, yeah, it's a number of years is a longer time. And then you have to look at the damage to the soil in that time. When people don't understand necessarily that the reason that you rotate crops and things like that is because if you keep planting the same thing, that you have you'll destroy the soil. You'll take all the phosphorus out or all the nitrates or whatever the case may be, depending on what you're planting there. So rotating what crops are there gives the soil time to regenerate some. It'll take some of the detritus, the dead plant material from old crops, and some of the stuff that you're using for fertilizer, and it'll help rejuvenate the soil yearly by rotating crops. But that's not a cure-all. We can't do that with trees, and we can't do that with a number of things. But on top of that, we also don't have like a ton of raw resources, like mineral ores and things of that nature. We just we can't compete with a lot of it. And as far as like rare resources, like emeralds, sapphires, lithium, um, other precious metals, and things like uranium, plutonium, we don't have access to that. Those minerals here, they're just we haven't found that many reserves for them. We don't have large quantities of them here like they do throughout the rest of the world. And the United States is smaller than we represent it on a lot of maps. I don't know if everybody knows this, but the maps show us that like what 25 to 30% larger a lot of times on maps and globes than what we actually are. I don't know why we ever started doing that. I would think probably just pride and ego, but we're not that big. We really aren't. And to pretend that we have the same resources and the same capacity to export as other countries is just folly. We know for a fact that we don't. Um, we are consumers. We bring in most of what we consume by and large. That's why so many of our products are made in China and Taiwan and Japan and Germany and all these other countries. It's and it's gotten worse, obviously, as factories have been driven out of America because it became cheaper somehow. Became cheaper to move an entire factory over there, and then to hire a bunch of people, put all new machinery in there to produce the same products that they were producing over here, put it all on the cargo ships, transport it all the way over here, and distribute it and sell it that way, than to just keep factories over here. Um, yeah, and somehow some of that stuff still costs more than it did before. Go figure. Why? Well, because they can charge you that same price or more. Because now you don't have another option. Nobody's going to build another factory. Nobody has the money to invest in another factory to compete. That's where things really have taken a turn for the worse, is that there just isn't as much money out there to create new factories, new industries to compete with the old ones. Because who's going to invest in you? These guys already have their money. Everybody who can invest already has their money in everything that is already in those industries for the most part. So getting new investors interested in new corners of the market or in competitive corners of the market to try to take a market share away from um, anybody who's got a good grip on their industry, like how are you going to compete with those? A brand new operating system could be, generated tomorrow. There's probably new operating systems generated, once every year at least, and that's cutting it very small. But how are they going to compete with all the other operating systems that are already out there? Microchips are already designed to inherently work with all these other operating systems to some greater or lesser degree using x86 architecture. So, how are you going to create a better architecture? How are you going to create? You'd have to start so raw. And then you'd have to try to get everybody into it. Like a brand new social media site could be developed tomorrow. How are you going to get everybody to join your social media site versus all the other ones that are already out there that already have big followings? What are you going to do to get them to come to you instead? It's difficult. It really is. Unless you have enough celebrity or status or something to get people to want to join your site, it's just unlikely to happen. But that's economics. That's where we're at with America, is that um, doing trade wars just for the sake of a trade war when you're a very consumer reliant economy, really reliant on those things to come in, the raw resources to come into your country so that your manufacturers can produce cheaper or they have better deals so that they can export and make up greater margins over there. That's a big problem. What should have happened, I don't know if a lot of people don't follow economics, so I'm not going to bag on people for not understanding a lot of this. It's complicated. There's so many moving parts, and it's bigger for a lot of people than they really have the ability to, kind of grasp. I did an Excel document, tried to spend $1 billion rationally, not like buying a billion bags of Skittles or something, but now, just like legitimately trying to be rational and spend $1 billion. It's a very hard concept for people to grasp what $1 billion really, really is. Even today, $1 billion is just a huge sum of money that most people have a very hard time understanding how that money kind of can exist. And once you have so much money and have so many things that you've purchased with money, what do you do with the rest of it? It becomes more and more and more and more difficult as time goes on to really make that money go back out. And one of the things that ends up happening is you typically just start creating revenue streams where you're making more and more and more money, um, which isn't a bad thing. But how do you take that money and then recycle it back into the economy? And that's what we used to do back in the 30s, the 40s, early 50s, when we had higher tax rates on the very, very wealthy people. It wasn't a form of punishment, but it was a way to keep the robustness of the economy and circulation going. Because if the wealth stagnated, then the dollar was going to inflate. We knew that. We knew that inherently because wealthy people have a harder time justifying spending money for nonsense. So the way to make sure that the money continued to circulate was to tax them so that the money would come back down through taxes. And then we would put those into public goods programs and programs from the government where we would provide services and jobs that were necessary for civil affairs, be it police forces or fire departments or healthcare or whatever the case may be. We could always find things to do that were going to create more jobs. We could create business loans that were going to help get new businesses going. Local governments and government can always find ways to spend money back into the economy and to fuel the economy. Far better than wealthy people and trickle down. Trickle down has never worked, will never work. There's no incentive, as long as we have the stock market in its current conception anyway. There's no incentive for a business to trickle down profits like that. It's just not going to happen. The only way that they're ever going to increase wages if they decrease enough jobs to levy that, so that their cost in wages doesn't go up and start taking away from their profitability. Because once their profitability goes down, their stock market, their stocks are going to take an impact because their profitability doesn't look as good. Stockholders don't care if you're taking care of your people, if your net profit goes down every quarter or plateaus, because what they want is the stocks to continue every 3 months to be going up and up and up, so that they can say, well, I can take loans against these stocks, which is another huge problem. I don't know if a lot of people know that, but a lot of these wealthy people, a lot of their wealth is tied up in stocks, but they take massive loans out against those stocks, and then they can usually use the interest from the money that they keep in the bank to pay off the loan and spend actual money that they really don't have. It's the bank's money, it's the bank's loan, but the bank is paying itself off through interest. It's a wild fucking thing. It really is. It shouldn't exist, but it's something that rich people can do with a lot of stocks that the rest of us just don't have access to. It's not an option. But again, it's money that's not coming to the rest of the economy, right? That stays up at the top. So people get upset because they want government to fix that, but they don't want government to raise taxes on the rich because they're afraid that if they raise taxes on the rich, that the rich people will raise how much it costs for everything. It's the same argument as they did when they said, well, if you raise wages, then the businesses will have a greater expense in wage cost, which is true, absolutely was. But then businesses will add that extra cost to the cost of the product, and the consumer will have to pay for the difference, right? Which is ironic that they understand that to a degree. But how do they not understand that tariffs will be a cost to a business? And then businesses will raise the cost of the product to levy their cost there. So it really doesn't make sense that, you can argue it one way, but not the other when they're the exact same concept. Anytime a business's cost is greater, they're going to try to offset that cost by putting it onto the consumer. That's just what it is. Um, on the flip side of that, if the cost of a business's processes go down, they're not going to lower the cost of their product 90% of the time because that's stupid. You've already been paying that much. You're still going to pay that much regardless. You're not looking at it day to day, checking how much the profit margin is on something and going, well, gee, I'm not buying your product anymore because now you're making far more money on it because you were given a break somewhere else, and now it should be cheaper, but it's not. So I'm just not going to buy it. No consumer is doing that. You paid the same price yesterday. You're going to pay the same price today. You have no idea what the costs of that company are, how much profit they are or aren't making on a daily basis on that product. You have no idea. So nobody cares. And a business is certainly not going to tell you that now they're making 125% more profit on this thing this month than last month, because they have no incentive to. And even if they told you that, you're not going to care. You're not going to jump up and go like, well, in that case, I want a deal. You're still going to pay the same price, and that's just what you've done, and that's what you're always going to do. So trickle down does not work. Businesses have no incentive to utilize trickle down to pay that money back down in wages. The only time businesses will ever increase a wage is if they're either shrinking their workforce to levy that cost, or if they're trying to do a PR stunt for a period of time, in which case they'll usually do it as like a bonus program. And then next year, that bonus program will be discontinued. And a lot of times that bonus program was financed by tax breaks from the government or credits from the federal government, or in the time of COVID, a lot of that money was given to these businesses through COVID programs from the federal government. So these business people are like, oh, that business gave me all these money. The business didn't give you shit. They passed on money from the federal government because they had to. If they'd have kept that money, they would have been in a huge, huge problem. So that money was supposed to be given to you to keep you safe, keep you at home, reward you for coming into work if you're an essential worker, whatever the case may be. I'm gonna be honest with you right now, as somebody who was an essential worker during that time, if you were able to stay home, you guys usually made quite a bit more than what we did. People were like, oh, we got a quarterly bonus from COVID of like $300 or something. That ain't shit. We're working our ass off because the workload went up drastically in all these businesses. These businesses profited a huge amount during that time. A lot of them raised prices, sometimes fairly, often unfairly, on the consumer. Supply and demand being what it is, but they aren't supposed to. And to be fair, they did enact policies at one point for the emergency. I forget the exact name of the state of emergency, where which prevents people from businesses from illegally raising prices to fleece the consumer, which a lot of people were doing. So they did put a stop to that, and they did prosecute some people for that. But yeah, they gave these businesses a lot of money from the federal government, and a lot of those businesses passed it on and said that they were, or treated it like they were the ones who individually were making the choice to give this money to you, and they weren't. These businesses made out like bandits, and the people who were stuck at work with these massive workloads and the stress and the risk to their health, they got screwed, honestly. That's the reality of the situation. It is what it is, but hopefully it's, shit like that is passed, and hopefully we've learned something from it. I know a lot of us haven't, because I've dealt with discussions with that far too often, where people don't really understand a lot of the information or the things that went through that, or the medicine that's involved in it, and the biology, and it's a lot of stuff. I get it. There's so much science. There's so much bad information out there. The crap about people saying, well, they found out Fauci was lying about, and I'm like, lying about what? Lying about what? Tell me what Fauci was found to be lying about. and then they can't. They try to come up with like random things, but all they remember in their head is that somebody said that Fauci was lying, or they saw a meme that said Fauci was caught lying in it or admitted to lying, and it's not true. None of it's true. Fauci never admitted to lying about shit because he didn't lie about anything. Um, People were freaking out. I remember one of the things that people were like, "Oh, he didn't wear a mask at a baseball game." Yeah, he was there with other people who had tested negative for COVID. They wore their masks when they were around a bunch of people, but then later on, when they were seated well away from everybody fucking else in public, they took their masks off because they were in a safe area, right? You can't sit there and be like, well, people, they wore their masks in a car, haha. Yeah, that's stupid. But so would be wearing a mask when you're 40 feet away from other people. Just because you're at a public stadium doesn't mean that while you're sitting down, you still needed to wear a mask. All right? That's fucking dumb. Like, the double standards and the sheer foolishness of a lot of these things was just nuts. That's what we need to get away from. We need to get away from double standards. You can't say one thing in one breath and then say something completely contradictory in the next breath, trying to say that your message or your point or whatever vindicates you. If you go out every day and the only thing you're looking for online is things that vindicate your viewpoint, you will absolutely find them. I don't care what your viewpoint is. We obviously know there's shit out there right now that can help prove in the flat earth and that we live in a dome, a fucking snow globe or some bullshit. There's proof for just about any nonsense out there right now. There's people who are absolutely supporting absolute nonsense fucking stories and shit out there. That doesn't make it so. It doesn't make it true. You cannot go out only looking to validate what you think is the truth. That's just not the case. That's not how the world operates. That's not how anything operates. And please, everybody, stop relying on polls and surveys. You can ask the vast majority of your teachers out there, and they're going to tell you right now that while polls, surveys are tools, they are not reliable tools. They're not proof of anything. And they are certainly flawed. You cannot have a survey that's empirically accurate to anything. You cannot have a poll that's empirically accurate to anything. And the reason for that is because you'd have to have a sampling group that you knew was fair and balanced and reflective of everything. But that's just not the case in society. Do you think liberals or let's just say Democrats, let's cut out that nonsense. Do you think Democrats in New York are the same as Democrats in California, or they're the same as Democrats in Texas or Wisconsin? They're not. Do you think Republicans in Alabama are the same as Republicans in Northern California, or they're the same as Republicans up in upper state, New Jersey or in fucking, I don't know, Colorado? They're not. There's so many different viewpoints and cultures on all these things that trying to get polling data by just doing a poll of a handful of people within a certain pool of people is so misrepresentative of things. And on top of that, if you're comparing a survey of people from year to year, but you're not using the same people, you already have skewed results. And then like a poll that I just saw today that kind of brought this up to my mind was one that compared people's perceptions of Biden in his fourth year to Trump this year. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, I hope what you should be thinking is that, well, Trump just got sworn in, near the end of January. How can we already be rating his performance and calling it one way or the other, right? And if you look at the survey, you can, to a degree, see that with the independents and the Democratic voters. Obviously, there was some bias with the Democratic voters and the independents one way or another. There always is going to be. But it was small. It was marginal, and you could chalk it up to bias. But the conservative voters at the end of the fourth year of a Democrats period were like massively disapproving. So the approval rate of the president was like 38 or 35% or something terrible like that. It was awful, as you would expect from conservatives being polled on a Democratic president. It just, that's the way it's been for God knows how long. But this year already, in the 30 days Trump has officially been president of the United States, they had said that it went up to like 80%. Conservatives said, oh, that much better. Everything's already that much better. Fucking, what policies have even been able to be enacted at any level for the most part, outside of executive orders, that would be even impactful, number one. And it's been a shit show. Nobody even knows what's happening from one day to the next. Half the organizations don't know exactly what's going on. Even the people that Trump has put in office are being combative with Elon Musk's Doge department, which apparently Elon Musk isn't in charge of, even though he's in charge of it. Even though, during the election cycle, President was like, he's absolutely in charge of this. Him and Vivek are going to be running this thing, and it's going to be amazing. Only now they're not running this thing. They have nothing to do with it. They're just the president's counsel, but they keep giving all the emails, and they hired... So it's a shit show. It's a shit show. But because of partisanship, that number went from 38% or whatever to 80%. It's just an insane shift. And if we're pretending even for a moment that that's based on people really looking at the things and being analytical and going, well, based on the research that I've done, I'm looking at the bills that have all been passed and really thinking about the cabinet picks and having gone over their history and really assessing the values and the contributions and the plans that they have put forth. No, nobody did that. These people weren't doing this, right? And you don't know that these people that they polled this year were the same people as that they polled last year. So how can you say that these people's viewpoints shifted when it's not the same people? Now you can say you could switch it and just say that, the people individually that we uphold have a greater perception this year this way than the people that we polled last year. But it's misrepresented when you say the people in general who fit into these categories had a view and a shift in view, because you don't know that that's what happened with all the people that you polled last year. They don't necessarily have that shift in view that you're trying to represent. Also, there was no hard figures for how many people they polled that fit into any of the categories. So this could have been a heavily skewed amount of information just based on that. All you ever had was a percentage of the people who answered in a specific way based on the demographic. So there was never a hard number to tell you how many people total were polled that fit into any category, into any metric. So there was, like I said, there's just no way to make that poll work. And it's a reason why when you really look at polls, when you really start analyzing where they get their results, who they're polling, how they're incentivizing these polls, like some polls are done by people who they get paid to take polls. They're on these little apps online or on your phone that you can make money by taking polls. And then people are trying to utilize these polls as if they were genuine. Well, a lot of these people are on those apps. They're just clicking because they're going to get paid by the number of polls that they complete, the number of surveys that they complete. So their incentive isn't to be accurate or honest. Their incentive is to accomplish as many polls or surveys as possible to get as much money as possible. So you're really being generous in thinking that all these people are stopping and seeing that this one is a political poll. In which case, I need to really think about my answers because they think it's going to be really influential. So, yeah, they don't. I would say maybe 1 in every 30 to 40 people at absolute best, and I'm being very fucking generous on that, care that much about it. So if you ask statisticians, if you ask sociologists, if you ask most of your professors of anything, they're going to tell you that while polls are handy for sampling things and getting a kind of a general feel of some things, that most polls are not going to be considered empirical data. They're not going to be considered reliable data because they're just not. Now, news loves to use polls. The news media loves to use polls. And people are like, well, why would the news use polls if they weren't accurate? Motherfucker, they were telling you celebrities died who weren't dead for the longest time because they saw a post on Facebook or on TikTok. Uh, the news is always trying to get ahead of everybody else. The news is always trying to generate the most clicks possible because nowadays they make money on ad revenue online and clicks. Views on TikTok, views on whatever platform on YouTube. They're trying to get every aspect of revenue that they possibly can. So they will do whatever they can to get you to visit their sites more and more often, and that means trying to buy your patronage, and sometimes that means trying to serve you what they think you want to hear. That's why so many news media channels now, web pages, they have different fucking reporters that reflect either side. So they'll have specifically liberal reporters, they'll have specifically conservative reporters and editorialists that are just voicing opinions that frankly most people want to hear. They're looking for those opinions that are reaffirming to their values. It's not news. Editorials are not news. Do not treat an editorialist or an opinion column like it's fucking news. It is not. It is just somebody's opinion on things. And a lot of times they're giving you only the pieces that help to reinforce whatever opinion or editorial piece that they're trying to highlight. So stop treating that shit like that's what reality is, or that's the entire story. It's not. The internet's it is both a boon and a blessing and a curse. There's so much good information on the internet. There's a shitload more bad information on the internet. And unfortunately today, most people don't have the critical thinking or the self-awareness to be prepared for the bad information or the information that is going to feel good inside but isn't accurate information. And so they can't, or they don't want to, look at something and be critical of it. I can't tell you the number of times I see things and I'm like, oh man, yeah. But wait, just because it makes me feel good or just because I want to hear something like this doesn't make it true. Just because I would love to see Elon Musk is actually bald and wears the toupee, say, that's not true. It's not true. I'm making this shit up. This is just an example. But just because I would love to see an article, if I saw an article like that, I wouldn't automatically just assume that that's truth. I would be verifying it. I would be looking for other articles that support it. I would be looking for information that had more facts instead of just somebody saying it and speculation with no actual premise for fact. I would want something that really rounded out everything and made it so it was completely verified, and I wasn't going to repeat something that made me feel and look stupid. I look stupid enough, right? I feel stupid enough often enough. So when it comes to things online and I'm trying to get information about things or share information about things, I don't want to look dumb. There was an article the other day, a news story about a lady who got hauled out of a town hall for heckling the people who were hosting the town hall. Initially in the video, the sheriff is trying to get her to leave. I believe he threatens to arrest her and remove her. And then he steps back, whips out a cell phone and begins recording and motions a private security company who doesn't have any security company identification. They have no badges. Their shirts or jackets do not say security anywhere on them. They don't have security information anywhere on their hats that says that they're a security company. So it looks just like random friggin' people who are pulling this lady out. Now, I would say the lady should have complied with the sheriff. I would say that in a town hall, they should have allowed people to ask questions. Town hall is not necessarily something where they just speak. Now, typically they do have a time period where a speaker speaks to you and then you have an opportunity to ask questions of the speaker. I don't know how that one was set up. I don't know the full scope of the situation. I just know that the lady who, she spoke out of turn. Yes, the sheriff did tell her that she should leave. But the second that the sheriff whips out a phone to record her removal, and that a private security company became physically aggressive and manhandled this person, who was not in any way physically violent, just was choosing not to go. That was wrong. And since then, the company has had their security license removed. That's the right thing to do. For those who don't know, removing a sheriff is very difficult. The only ways to really do it, I believe, are the county coroner. I believe has the authority to remove the sheriff if your county has a coroner. If not, it becomes even more difficult. Or just the people have to vote for somebody else in the next election, which I'm going to tell you 90% of the time people vote incumbents, not because they necessarily know what that person has done or will do, but because they recognize the name. And familiarity is a big problem for human beings. We vote for familiarity. We check that box because we know the name. We don't like unfamiliar things. We don't like unknown quantities. So if you see a name that you don't know, you're not going to check that box 90% of the time, even if you don't like the person in the other box. You just check the name because this is what happens at the voting booth with a lot of people, and it's a huge problem. That's why we hear constantly people going, well, I don't understand why we have these people and they've been there for 30, 40 years. It's bullshit. Everybody thinks it's bullshit. But we're the fucking problem. We have a system set up where you have to vote for the Republican or the Democrat, when in reality, you should have more options than just the one or the other. There should be options within parties that you can go and say, and there are primaries, but a lot of people, of course, don't participate in primaries either, so that's a problem. But how often would you like to see, your senators or your congressmen in a genuine part in the final elections and go, hey, I don't want the guy who's been in there forever. I want, this other guy. So whether or not that Republican won his primary, I still want an option to vote against, my Democratic representative that's in there right now. I'd like the other guy, the new, Democratic option. So we have a busted system, and we have a very easy to abuse sociological way of doing things. The mental state of people is so simple. People have very, very easy to abuse habits. So when you think that you're unique or special, or you're complicated and complex, and you're beautiful special rose, and nobody can trick you into doing things you don't want to do, you're being used. You're being lied to all the time. You're being tricked. These systems are just absolutely bastardizing any individual thought processes that you have. So unless you start working into your primaries, unless you start really vetting your resources, unless you start looking at everything that you think makes you feel good about and vindicates your beliefs or your opinions, and start trying to go and verify all of that data and holding the bullshit to account, and really being more analytical, more critical and aware of all the bullshit that's out there. Not trying to reinforce your own opinions, but trying to find truth and facts, and then let your opinions be influenced by the truth, the full truth, not just a part of the truth or not just somebody's opinions of truth, and not letting your opinions try to influence what you perceive as fact, but finding the full facts, getting the real story, and then letting that actually influence your opinions. If you are so easily bruised in your ego and your pride that you cannot bear to have your opinions be influenced by what may be the real truth about things, then the real problem here isn't that the other side is bad or anything else. It's the fact that you're so insecure about where you stand on things that you will fight tooth and nail against what you think might be true to vindicate your opinion. And I see that a lot. If I say things sometimes in post that offend somebody or put you in a defensive point where you feel like I'm attacking you, Um, I'm not. I'm not usually trying to attack anybody, but I am making a stand. I am saying that you need to be more self-critical and self-aware of the things that we do and how they impact people. Because I'm not against conservatives. I'm not against Republicans. I'm absolutely not. I talk to a lot of them. I have a lot of them as friends. I think most of the conservatives and Republicans I know are wonderful people. I have people that I know that are Democrats or liberals that I think are just as big a piece of shit as some conservatives and Republicans I know. But people are people. I don't levy where your politics lie as any weight specifically on who you are as a person or the quality of a person you are. You can be a good or bad person regardless of your politics. My point in a lot of this is that we have better options. Many times I'm on all the different sides of this friggin' thing, and we're letting stupidity rule us. We're letting mob mentality take charge. Uh, we're so worried about how people might perceive us if we speak out against certain things or speak for certain things, that we're allowing terrible things to happen. That we're allowing people's rights to be stripped away. That we're allowing programs that are hugely impactful to the economy and to the people to be stripped away, and that's ridiculous. That's absolutely ridiculous. We cannot go forward allowing this to happen. It's not helpful to any of us. All right. Oh man, I don't know. We all want a better tomorrow. That's the reality. So we all want a better tomorrow. We want a better day. We want freedoms, I think, for everybody. I would like to think we want freedoms for everybody, the same freedoms, I think, for everybody. Now, if you're one of those people who don't want the same freedoms for everybody, one, you're not American. You are not a patriot. You cannot be an American or a patriot and say that you don't want every single person who lives in this country who's an American citizen to have the same freedoms, all of the freedoms. That means the freedom to marry. That means the freedom to have your name be whatever the fuck you want it to be. Um, that means the freedom to live your life however you want, to pursue happiness however you want, and to do so without any extra rules, any extra stipulations, any guidelines that say that you can do so under certain restrictions. Abso-fucking-lutely not. Fair and equal freedom for all. No fucking questions. If you think Nazis should be able to walk down the street and speak their piece because of freedom of speech, then you think that people who are transgender should get to say, hey, this is the pronoun I would like to use, or this is the name I would like to be called. And if you can't square those two things away, you're not a patriot. You're a bigot. You're picking and choosing who you think should have freedom based on your bigotry. That's all it is. And you can be like, I'm not a bigot, but you are. You are. Well, I just have specific views. Yeah, they're bigoted views. We don't like to think ill of ourselves. Nobody likes to fucking think ill of themselves. People who were burning crosses in people's yards didn't think that they were bad people. Do you honestly think that people who did awful things to people for centuries looked at themselves and went, yeah, I'm a piece of shit. Absolutely. I'm awful. I'm terrible. I'm going to hell and I'm happy about it. None of them thought they were doing bad things. They all justified the things that they were doing. They all had justifications in their head. So you can try to justify it, but it doesn't change the fact. And you can say, well, I'm not doing the bad thing. This guy that I voted for, he's doing so many other good things, though, that it's you got to take some losses with the good. Really? So what's the good? What good are we getting out of stripping freedoms away from people and hurting people? What good in our Constitution have we ever said is the equal balance of stripping rights from American citizens? What soldier died on the fucking battlefield and said, I lay my life down for freedom and justice for all people and the American dream. For all people. Unless you can bring the price of fucking eggs down enough. In which case, that, fuck their freedoms. Get those eggs down. None. Not a fucking person. So if you're trying to lay that down as any kind of justification for voting for somebody who you know is going to have negative impacts on the freedoms and the happiness of your friends or your family members or your community members just because they belong to a different class of person, be they just from a different political perspective or a different gender perspective or sexuality or a different religion, whatever the case it may be, if you think anything justifies that, if you think anything justifies removing somebody's freedoms, then you're a piece of shit. I'm gonna be honest with you. You're absolutely nuts to think that anything justifies removing freedoms from somebody. That is the least American thing you can say. I don't care if you are a veteran. You are absolutely pissing on all of our brothers and sisters and their sacrifice. And absolutely dishonoring yourself if you are joining that team. Because if you're a veteran, you and I both know that not everybody who fucking served is a man or a woman of honor. Putting on that uniform at the end of the day didn't make us all fucking saints or all heroes. And it definitely didn't make us right. So don't pretend for a second that being a veteran means you have a better opinion, or that your opinion should be of more value, or that you should be immune, or that you can't possibly be somebody who is not a patriot. Don't fucking go there, because we all know better than that. And for you couch warriors out there who think you could have served, or, I'm gonna be honest with you. I tried to quit in boot camp. I did. And I snapped. I snapped twice hard. That's where I take my own damn life. I didn't want to fucking be there. But they pushed me through that shit. And I went through unbelievable agony and pain because of a severe fucking problem with my back. But I made it through. So you probably could have made it through too, but you didn't. So don't give me this bullshit where, well, I could have. Yeah, you probably could have, but you didn't. So fuck off. That doesn't change shit. You don't have the training, you don't have the knowledge, you didn't have the freaking courage to nut up and actually do it. You sat home and you spent years going, well, I could have, but you didn't. I could have been an astronaut, maybe. Who knows? I didn't. So I don't get to speak like I'm an astronaut, and I don't pretend to be one. So stop. And just living in America doesn't make you a patriot. And it doesn't prevent you from being a bigot and wanting to think of yourself as a good person while enabling atrocities and enabling the removal of freedoms and enabling everything that's anti-American. You really need to square that shit away. You can only play the game, well, I thought it was going to do something better for so long before you have to fucking look at it and go, but it didn't. And I'm responsible for that shit. So let's be honest about it. Sooner or later, you have to deal with that. Do you think people in Germany didn't look back after having elected fucking Adolf Hitler and had to square that shit with themselves? The ones who knew that there was internment camps and had to pretend that they didn't know, they knew. They knew Jews were being killed. And they were going to pretend for a long time, even after. Many went to the grave probably completely denying that. But they knew. And they had to square that with themselves. And they have to square that with God. So if you're sitting there thinking, well, well, too bad. Because whether or not you admit it to us, sooner or later, if you really do believe in God, you got to square it with him. And he fucking knows. He knows. All right. That's all I got for y'all tonight. So, peace out, y'all.